To understand the battles fought here at Manassas, you really need to understand the tactics. But to understand the tactics, you have to understand the technology, the weaponry. And to that end, we're going to have the members of the 14th Brooklyn Militia demonstrate some muskets carried by the infantry here, rifled muskets in particular. Following their presentation, we'll be demonstrating the artillery branch of the service. Now, we're not actually going to fire that cannon over there, but we will give you an opportunity to learn the gun drill if you so desire. But it is also important, especially this Memorial Day weekend, to understand that these weapons did inflict quite a few casualties. There were some 4,000 men killed here at Manassas between the two battles, and there are thousands more wounded and maimed for life, and their sacrifice certainly should never be forgotten. Also at 3 o'clock, starting right over here, we'll have a guided tour of the Chin Ridge area, focusing on the very heavy fighting that took place here on the afternoon of August 30th, 1862. So we invite you to stick around for that. But right now, I present to you the 14th Brooklyn Militia.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, everybody. We're the 14th Brooklyn New York State Militia. We trace our lineage back to the early 1600s when the Dutch burghers first settled Brooklyn, New York. We were the only regiment named after a city. Most regiments during the Civil War were named after states. In fact, all of them are except for ours. We were a militia unit, which is like the National Guard is today. So we were in existence before the war actually started, and then volunteered our services to preserve the Union. At the time of the Civil War, we had about 250 men in our unit. We recruited up to full regimental strength, which is 1,000. And throughout the war, we lost men, and we re-recruited to bring up to strength. So 1,800 men served in this unit. 200 came home 3 years later. We served 3 years of service, and in fact, we were one of the first units here to protect the capital, Washington, from Confederate invasion in 1861. So we fought here at the First Battle of Manassas. We were actually the only red-legged unit that fought at the First Battle of Manassas. 14th Brooklyn fought side by side on Henry Hill with the United States Marine Corps and their only land engagement during the Civil War. 14th Brooklyn also was not one of the Union units that fell back in disarray. We actually fell back in order when we had to withdraw from the field because, as you know, who won that first battle?
South.
The South won it, so we had to actually leave the field. They nicknamed us the Red-Legged Devils from Brooklyn, the Confederates did, because of our fierceness in combat. Nobody was combat tested during the first battle, of course, until the first battle, but they nicknamed us the Red-Legged Devils because of the way we fought. But being such that we had to leave the field because of a Confederate victory, we left our wounded colonel behind in an ambulance cart. The colonel was the head of our regiment. The colonel was captured, and early in the Civil War, you were able to exchange prisoners. So we got our colonel back in exchange for a Confederate captain by the name of Patton. Anyone ever hear of a Patton from Virginia? It was George Patton's grandfather was a captain in the Virginia Infantry, and we actually exchanged our colonel for Patton. Colonel Wood went home to Brooklyn and recovered from his wounds as a war hero. He was elected the mayor of Brooklyn. There's a monument in his honor in Brooklyn, so he was quite a popular man. Our lieutenant colonel took over the regiment and led our unit through 3 more years of combat. We came back through these fields for the Second Battle of Manassas, and in fact, we have a monument on New York Avenue that was erected by the veterans of the unit in 1906 to honor the men that fell at both battles, at First Manassas and Second Manassas. So this is a very, very important battlefield for this particular unit. And in fact, we are a nonprofit historical corporation. As I mentioned, this unit was created in the early 1600s, and it lasted until the 1980s. After the Civil War, We actually fought in Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So we have a number of men in our organization that are actual veterans from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. We also have descendants of some of the men that actually fought in this unit during the Civil War. In fact, Sergeant Wadikas on the right-hand side here, he had two ancestors that fought with the 14th Brooklyn during the Civil War. After the Second Manassas battle, this unit fought valiantly at Antietam in the cornfield. There's a monument to the 14th Brooklyn there. And then they marched up to Pennsylvania and fought all 3 days at the Battle of Gettysburg. They actually are the only unit that has 3 monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield, the largest of which is on the railroad cut. There's also a monument at McPherson's Ridge and on Culp's Hill, if you know anything about the Battle of Gettysburg. After that battle, we fought the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse in 1864. That was the end of our service. That was the last major battle. After 3 years, we had enlisted for 3 years, we got out. As I said, 1,800 served, 200 came home at the end of the war. Those who hadn't served their 3-year term of enlistment were transferred to other regiments in the Union Army and served out their 3 years, unless their 3 years did not end before the war ended in 1865. We have very distinct uniforms. Our uniforms are patterned after French-Algerian uniforms during the period to create esprit de corps in our unit. Being from Brooklyn, New York, which was the 3rd largest city in the United States at the time of the war, we had a number of men in our unit that had, were men of means. We weren't poor farmers, we were businessmen, we were farmers, we were clerks, we had some influential people in the unit. As such, the city of Brooklyn supplied our uniforms throughout the war. So we're one of the few colorful units that actually, when our uniforms wore out, we were resupplied with the same uniforms, not just the regular Union blue uniforms, which a lot of Zouave units had to transition to when their original uniforms wore out. We are not Zouave, we are chasseurs. And there are distinct differences in those uniforms for the most part. Typically, a Zouave uniform wore pantaloons, which were baggy pants that came right below your knee. These are actually straight leg trousers cut in the period fashion. Just happen to be red, but they're just regular trousers. We're also wearing a blue tunic with a red fold sewn in vest, and we're wearing kepis rather than fezzes and turbans. So those are some of the unique differences with a chasseur uniform versus a Zouave uniform. Attention, company! You'll see that shoulder, arms. Going to get a little bit closer. Forward, march. Company, halt. Order, arms. You'll see that I'm a commissioned officer. I'm a lieutenant. So my uniform is a little bit different. This is a non-commissioned officer, an NCO. He's a quartermaster sergeant. So you can see one of those uniforms. These 2 gentlemen are privates. All of the enlisted men are wearing belt buckles with an SNY belt plate. What do you think that means? Snot-nosed Yankee? State of New York. So a lot of New York units, and we were a New York militia unit. In fact, when we went off to war in 1861, we came down here, and we're supposed to be under the governor's control. Well, he didn't give the order for us to leave the state. So he was a little bit upset. Well, fortunately, our commander, Colonel Wood, had a very powerful friend in Congress by the name of Moses Odell. Moses Odell happened to be a personal friend of Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States. So Moses Odell had Lincoln sign an order ordering us into the service of the federal government. So then when the governor asked the question, by whose orders did you leave the state of New York? We said, by orders of the President of the United States. And as such, we were the only unit to be ordered directly into combat by the President of the United States. But a lot of New York State units did use the SNY belt plate on their uniform, and a lot of metal detector hunters would probably find them around the battlefields of Virginia and you would know that a New York unit fought there. We also, at the time of the first battle, we wore hard packs on our back carrying a lot of personal items. We had to leave those on the side of the field to go into combat, and being as such that we did not come back to retrieve things since we left the field, there's probably 1,000 of those backpacks lying around Virginia. So if you happen to see one, let us know. It's probably ours. Attention, company. Shoulder, arms. About, face. So they have here what's called a cartridge box. That's where the ammunition is stored, the cartridges. That's bullets and powder in one cartridge. And he's got an SNY plate on the back of his cartridge box. Frequently those fell off and were lost. As you can see, these men don't have them. So those are lost on the field as well frequently. About, phase. Order, arms. This is what's called a cap pouch. This is where the percussion caps were held. And this gentleman has the New York State shield on his cap box. And frequently that came off and was lost as well, so you might find one of those around somewhere. They're carrying, well, I'm wearing a haversack. That's usually where you put your food, not personal belongings. So these were kind of greasy inside because you had food in them. He's wearing a canteen. They have bayonets. That's typical of the Union soldier. But one of the things that is a little bit unique is that the cartridge box is on the belt in our unit. Again, shoulder, arms. About, phase. So what's unique about our uniform is that the cartridge belt box is on the belt itself as opposed to a strap that went over your shoulder. This is much more comfortable in my opinion, instead of having a big leather strap going across your neck and cutting into your neck as you're marching. About, phase. Order, arms. So that's some information about our unit and uniforms. Can I answer any questions about that before we go into a firing demo? Yes, sir.
One of the things that the colonists learned from the American Revolution was that it was a lot easier to target somebody who had a red uniform on, which was one of the problems that the British had. It was a bright red, it was easy to distinguish. Why red?
Well, as I said, we adopted these uniforms from the French Algerian uniforms of the period to create esprit de corps. They're very colorful and sharp-looking uniforms. And really, during the Civil War, they fought using Napoleonic tactics. So you had two big lines facing each other on the field of battle. Nobody was invisible, regardless of the color of uniform you wore. And in fact, we could find our casualties a lot easier by wearing the red trousers.
Unless you were in a place like Spotsylvania.
Yeah.
You know, in the woods and so forth. And, okay. Well.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. But that was late in the war. So
yeah.
These uniforms were adopted at the beginning of the war.
Gotcha.
What's the logo or emblem on your belt buckle?
On my belt buckle?
Yes.
That's the Union shield.
Okay. Well, I thought it was just one of those things. But and is that emblematic because you're the commissioned officer in charge of that unit?
That's typical of what a commissioned officer would wear on his sword belt.
Is that accurate to the Brooklyn militia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. They did not wear. There was a New York officer belt buckle, but that was typically used during the militia by the militia in the 1840s. Wasn't typically seen in the 1860s. So if you see one, it's probably not Civil War period. Any other questions? Those are good questions. Okay, we're going to give a little firing demo now. So I'm not sure if Jim mentioned it might be a little loud. If you want to cover your ears when we're firing, if loud noises bother you or scare a little child, you might want to be prepared. Attention, company, shoulder, arms, about, face, forward, march. You guys know that. We're going to go through a drill that's called loaded 9 times. And this is typically how a soldier was trained to load and fire their rifle, okay? So you're not going to hear those kind of commands during a combat situation. They should know this secondhand by the time that they go into battle. But during training, when they're learning how to fire their weapon, we're going to go through the, it's called, what? It's part of the Manual of Arms. It's called load in 9 times. Load in 9 times, load. Handle, cartridge. So now he's getting the cartridge box into position to take a cartridge out of the cartridge box. And they're handled and they're brought up to their mount because they got to tear up the top of the cartridge to get the gunpowder and bullet out to put in the barrel. Tear, cartridge. So now they're tearing it with their teeth. What happens if they have no teeth?
Serving the cavalry.
Probably they're going to have strong gums, right? Yeah, there you go. Charge, cartridge. So now they're putting the powder and the bullet down the barrel.
How long did it take the whole process?
A good soldier could fire 3 rounds a minute. We're going to let you time them when we're ready to fire.
Okay.
Draw, rammer. So now they have a ramrod and they're going to ram down the bullet and the powder down the barrel. Ram, cartridge. So they're ramming it down. Now in the heat of battle sometimes they might have forgotten to take the ramrod back out. And if they fired it with the ramrod in it, it would shoot out. Of course it might maim or kill somebody. But worse than that, not worse, but it would render the weapon inoperable without a ramrod. So if they lost that ramrod, they were in a lot of trouble. Return, rammer. Okay, so now they're returning the rammer back into the rifle. Prime. So now they're going to take a cap out of their cap box, and it's a percussion cap that's going to ignite the powder that fires the bullet when they fire it. So they're putting it on what's called a nipple on the rifle. So there's a percussion cap now on the nipple, and that's going to trigger an ignition that'll fire the rifle. Okay, ready? Ready. Aim. Fire. Load. So now I've just given him the order to load. So a good man will fire 3 rounds a minute, start timing them. Let's see how quickly they can load and fire. Anybody got a stopwatch?
Question.
After. They're going to fire at will. So as soon as they're ready to fire, load. How long did that take?
40 seconds from the beginning.
Not up to snuff, are they? New recruits. Don't load yet. Fire, you ready? One more. There's always somebody picking up the rear. All right. That's 3. How long did it take to do 3 rounds? Okay, well that's so bad. All right, so now we're going to try something called firing by file. Okay, so this is a file. File, file, file. Okay, then there are ranks. Usually there were 2 ranks, and the second rank would be where I am, and there'd be men behind me. So if we fired by file, 2 men would be firing in this file together, right? And then he would start, then he would fire. To be somebody firing over him, and then this guy would fire. So we're going to try that for you. Except I don't have a second rank. We just have 1 rank, but we're going to fire by file. Load. Okay, fire by file from the right. Ready. Fire. Cover. Move. Did you see how the progression went from right to left? Yeah, if there was a line of men, it would be pretty impressive if you had a whole company of 100 men firing at one time. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
So now we're going to fire by rank, and since there's only one rank, there's not two ranks, it's just going to be the front rank. Ready. Fire by rank. Ready. Aim. Fire. Cover. Draw. Rammer. Spring them. Now we're making sure that the guns are empty for safety purposes. Okay. Turn. Rammers. Shoulder. Arms. About. Face. Forward. Left wheel. March. Yeah. Up. Forward. March. Company. Halt. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the 14th Brooklyn. You're welcome to come back and take photos with us, ask additional questions, mingle.
Now come on this side of the fence.